Hello, class. I'm sharing with you a case study from a project I did back in 2011 that is relevant to the work we're doing this week with creating concepts and strategy directions with our decks for our rebrand. I want to share this with you in order for you guys to get a look inside what a deck on a professional project on a global brand looks like and the kind of approach and techniques that are used by a design team to a marketing team in order to communicate how to approach a rebrand and how to get understanding and buy-in to the concepts. So I want to show this to you and kind of give you a sort of in-depth look at how this works. What you're seeing here is our cover page with the Johnson & Johnson logo, kind of graphically treated. But we worked with the Global Strategic Design Office, which is sort of the office for design within Johnson & Johnson, within all the brands. Johnson & Johnson is a big global brand. They own many brands, hundreds of brands. And they have a team here in New York that that they sort of like a design firm for the company, and they do a lot of outsourcing for teams like myself and my company Toda. So we have done many projects as Toda working with them. But when we present as part of the Johnson & Johnson design team. So that's why this deck utilizes the graphic treatment or the graphic direction of their office versus Toda's. So what I want to give you here is a sense of what we did for this project. And whenever we start a project, we always start by kind of talking about what the meeting is for and the purpose of the meeting and what they're required at the end. And here we just kind of talk about the idea of presenting the overall project and the brand, and that the purpose of the decisions we want to have at the end are to kind of align on design strategies in order to start developing the design. So what we do with the kind of beginning parts of a project, whenever we're doing a really big project that requires review by big marketing teams and their bosses, and kind of has a lot at stake in terms of money and investment, and success needs to be not guaranteed, but needs to be well thought through in order to make sure that the work that gets done and the changes that get made to the face of the brand are going to be successful and hit the right key points. So design framework kind of sets up what the project is about. And here, this is the time where the design team is kind of talking back to the marketing team, kind of telling them what they already know at some level, but expressing it so that, you know, as a reminder to everybody why we're doing this and what some of the key ideas are. A brand footprint on this page here just kind of demonstrates kind of in one page everything about the brand in terms of its heritage and its belief and the vision it has and the kind of position it takes, you know, the targets and competition, the benefits, you know, the reasons why it exists, and the personality and the connection. It's kind of a thing that that helps the marketing team to always sort of like their compass to keep in mind what they're doing and why. And oftentimes it's about showcasing the brand as it currently exists in order to give it context of what is it that we're approaching, what's the condition of the brand now. So just looking at the existing packaging, and here we see both two different kinds of dispensing, the drops, the solution, the topical solution that gets applied with these eye drop things, and then the foam, which gets used in that kind of hair foam way. And then another thing that happens sort of in this early stages is just a reminder of the competition. This is not news to them. They know their competition, but they kind of look at their packaging. This kind of survey to see what is it that's out there and why are they doing this. And a big thing that's showing here is that the fact that they've been out so long and that they have this thing called private label, where companies like CVS or Walgreens or other big drugstore brands can do private label version of hair growth, regrowth product. And you can see here that these companies here kind of utilize different looks and feels to try to give it more than just a generic look, but to give it some value. And there's elements that get used here that are already being used by Rogaine that Rogaine wants to try to differentiate themselves from this kind of generic competition. So that's one thing that comes up. And then there's this idea of a shelf set. And this is basically a simulation of what the actual environment in the store looks like a shelf in the drugstore. And these are very useful tools for marketing teams because it gives them that kind of full context of what it's like when a customer encounters the product within the shopping experience. And you can see here that Rogaine's up in the top right corner of the shelf. And it's put there because it's more of this like realistic rendition of what is going to really happen in these stores. And it's not going to be front and center at eye level or lower. It's going to be kind of tucked away in the corner. And these other more glamorous hair care brands are going to be put in front. So that's a reality that we accept. And this current shelf set, or the idea of a shelf set, is really valuable within the design process when you've come to a set of prototypes and almost ready to make the decision to go forward. One of the kind of quantitative tests they make is they'll take a shelf set like this and they'll put the current brand exactly like you see here, and they'll do other shelf sets that show the new designs placed up here in the corner in the same way. And maybe there's 3 or 4 or 5, 6 of them, depending on how many directions they have. And then they'll test these with people, like ordinary people. And they'll use some kind of computer program and they ask them to find Rogaine on the shelf. And they are able, through eye tracking, to time how long it takes to go, where is it? Oh, there it is. And there's a requirement, I think, for most big brands that if your new design takes longer to find on the shelf than the current one, then it's a no-go, it's stopped, and doesn't pass this test. It's important. So no matter how good it may look, no matter how great it may seem, if you can't find it fast enough because of the design, then it's sent back. And then sort of a survey of the current packaging to kind of, again, tell them what they already know about this project, but it's all kind of put in this context of redesigning. So looking at what is it that's causing this project to happen? Why is there a redesign? It's like looking at this package, it's this kind of, it's been around for a while and it's got a little bit of a certain dated look to it. And part of it has to do with the actual plastic kind of curved box it's in. That's great that it's see-through. So there's like a nice attribute there of being able to see through, but the sustainability level is not good at all. And they say that this is vulnerable to private label because everybody knows the colors and this kind of hair element. And so the competition that we looked at earlier are taking some of these elements and making theirs look similar to Rogaine so that the buyer would see that and go, oh, they seem to be the same value. So they want to try to distinguish themselves away from the competition that have already spent time copying them in certain ways. And then just really talk about the lack of aspiration, that this is just old and doesn't feel like anyone's going to buy this, that you at least, that will be inspired by the look of the packaging. And that this leads to like a set of objectives, design objectives, which is always good to have. Like this is what the marketing department supplied to us as a design team. It wasn't that we made this up. And there's a lot of detail here, but basically looking at better shelf impact and looking at a communication that is ownable and different from what like the private label and the competition have been doing, like to kind of reset them in a new way. But at the same time, they want to keep and reflect their brand equity, which means kind of the things that are valuable, the things people recognize, the things that have been around that you don't want to necessarily throw out. You want to upgrade them or use them differently. And then there's a connectivity to reflect the brand's transparency, a communication hierarchy, like starting with the big brand name and then who's it for, men or women, and then what form does it take? Is it the foam? Is it the solution? So making sure that the understanding of the consumer, regardless of how the upgraded design looks, is still there. Like they can understand it, see who it's from, and if it's the kind that they want and not mess that up. And the graphic hierarchy as well, like making sure the logo lockup is always dominant, keeping it bold, utilizing the blue color, and maybe even the gold as well. And then to look at sustainability so that the packaging becomes more environmentally friendly and responsibly sourced. And then it becomes a conversation about the audience, like we're doing with our project. And here we're sort of assessing the evolution of what we want the current Rogaine man to turn into, which is the new Rogaine man. And the current Rogaine man is sort of reactionary and trying to solve a problem and kind of desperate and sort of the last resort, trying to like find a way to deal with this problem, where we want to target a new kind of Rogaine man who's got a certain kind of attitude and style. He's balanced and is proactive in solving these problems. He wants performance, not expecting perfection, and he's a smart, thoughtful person who thinks through what he wants and does the right thing confidently. And so in order to visualize this, like we're doing with our project, creating a grid of images that showcase this target audience and the kind of different views of what this Rogaine man might be. And here again, it's really about combining well-selected photographs that show kind of a diversity of kinds of people, kinds of hair, kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, different attitudes and styles, and diversity of races and hair types, and even age. Even over here, it's kind of younger. The thing with Rogaine to know is that it works before you lose your hair. If you lose your hair, it doesn't really regrow it that much. It's more about keeping it from falling off in the first place. So that's why you'll always see men with pretty much full sets of hair. This one here is maybe more realistic in terms of when you should start using, but it's not wrong to say that all these guys have great hair because they're proactively, again, the new Rogaine man, trying to prevent the problem from happening, knowing that genetically they're predisposed to the losing hair. And then also we talk about this idea of touch points. Where is the brand encountered? And in the store is obviously really important, but also think about it. It's going to be on the go. It might be in traveling or at the gym. And of course, it's going to be home, and it should be home, and it should be normalized in a way where it's not like hidden under the sink because they don't want guests to see it. Like it could be out and open because it's a proud, cool brand, which is what they want to change it to, which is not really what it is right now. And then there's also this building a framework around what's called emotional touch points. It's just kind of these emotions that we've identified as being key. This is kind of based on doing things like mind maps and having these kind of workshops and talking about what we think, looking at their documentation of who they want to be and kind of coming up with these sort of mini pillars that are emotional touch points that reflect the brand and where we want the brand to go. And then we use these as elements to kind of dissect further into like 3 positioning attributes, we call these. So mastery, clarity, and performance are kind of how you summarize some of these positioning attributes, and kind of Venn diagram how some of them overlap each other. And that leads us to this kind of almost formula of the new Rogaine man based on these emotional touch points we identified. Can kind of be condensed into these 3 design themes, and that is going to kind of equal where we're going to go with Rogaine. And something like this is always really helpful to the more like non-artistic mind, where they want to kind of, they can't just deal with like feelings, they want to kind of see things quantified in a more logical way. And this is also helpful to designers who are creative to know where they're going. And then we also take the target audience and these attributes, kind of bring them together, like try to make them personified through people who we know in real life or in characters and movies. So mastery, we think kind of Don Draper, the Mad Men character, kind of embodies what we think mastery is about, this confidence and strength. And then performance is the young Professor Barack Obama as a teacher and community activist and getting the job done and doing it with kindness. And Blake Mikowski of the shoe brand, whose name I'm forgetting, Tom's Shoes, where he sells a shoe to you, and he gives a shoe away based on his purchase to you, to someone in need. So that kind of like straightforward, smart, ahead of their game, a simple, sharp kind of guy is what clarity is about. So then we take these design framework themes and just begin to explore them a little bit deeper. And again, in order to kind of set out all the ingredients, all the pieces needed to begin when we begin the idea of creating design. So we kind of go through and take these words about mastery and say, this is what the attribute of mastery looks like. This is kind of a combination mood board of design inspiration and feeling and emotion. Things like the fencers and the idea of mastery within this kind of sport, or mastery in kind of products, precision products like watches, or even this kind of cool motorcycle, and how it takes this kind of skill to run this high performance machine. But then also combine that with brands that have this kind of mastery feel to it, where we show what brands look like that take on this kind of more masterful attitude. And then we do the same with the other two. Performance becomes showcased in this both typographic and graphic inspiration, as well as kind of like these kind of mood images to show what matte performance is about. And this, provides good conversation with the client, where they can give feedback and they can begin to get primed towards some of the ideas that we're going to present in our design solutions. And then the same thing with clarity, like giving this text context to it, talking about this almost in a story form, in a way that non-design, non-artistic people can understand, and then show them what we mean by clarity and the idea of like simplicity and like strength in minimizing things. And then we're beginning to get a really good sense of how this kind of package can begin to take on the attributes of those three themes that we talked about. So this slide here is kind of about like taking what the current Rogaine packaging looks like and saying, okay, this is what it is, but we have brand equity. We have things that although they may not be working the best way, they are things that work well for us. So the idea of the logo and the current logo and how it has equity and how it's recognized. Could it use some revising? Could it be updated a little bit? Yes, perhaps, and it's not really the main purpose of this project. It's more of a brand rebrand in terms of the packaging, but we are going to look at the logo because there's opportunities there, but people recognize it, and it doesn't necessarily look, it's not necessarily expressing itself as a problem, but it could be upgraded, but we should not lose the recognition of that. And then we talk about with the logo, even the opportunity of the R maybe becoming a design element or a symbol, and maybe there's some potential with how this arm of the R kind of has this powerful diagonal thrust to it. So maybe there's something there that we can build on. Talk about the color blue and the gradient that kind of goes from dark to light, and how that is recognizable for Rogaine, and that will definitely be something that we can keep and study and utilize better. And then also the idea of the secondary packaging, this outside part, not the bottles themselves, but how structurally it's got this die cut in it and you can see inside of it. And seeing inside of a box is very helpful for the consumer experience. And I'm sure they got testing on that revealed that customers like that. The brand lockup here, where the bar, and the idea of the logo again, like that gold bar is a strong thing, and it really showcases what the brand is, and they want to make sure not to lose that idea. And then they have these kind of like 5 lines kind of swooping down here that have kind of a hair cue to them. Also saying how that's something that has value, and maybe we want to utilize that in a new way or in a different way, but to keep that in mind. And then at the bottom here, this little like seal of approval by dermatologists. It says #1 dermatologist recommended brand. And this is kind of a seal of approval, kind of provides reassurance to the consumer that they're buying something that's proven and efficacious. So that represents actually kind of like your last week. It represents the end of the first meeting. Is basically just talking about these things and laying out the basic framework for a design strategy. And then next we're going to go into a meeting that took place a few weeks later. That is kind of a continuation. We call the design framework continued. Again, we talk about what we want to get out of the meeting and the decisions that are needed. And we kind of start working on this kind of in pieces, like identifying that the logo is something that is going to be probably treated similarly, and is separate from the package design. So we wanted to kind of just have a quick logo session with them and talk about the things we're doing. And in this case, we kind of decided to let them into the workshop, so to speak, and show some of the things we're thinking about and why we're doing it, and reveal the changes we're making and how, because it's so subtle, it's almost like you couldn't see it, but we said we just kind of want to take things and adjust them in a way where they're going to come out feeling fresher, looking better, but not changing their look. We also looked at things that might be worth exploring, like maybe a concept of a growing hair or an arrow going upwards, showing this kind of like organic positive strength towards growth. And then we also talked about how we want to try to achieve a certain kind of value that you get out of these kind of old-fashioned printing techniques where you have gold foil or embossing, but the kind of thing that we can't do because of both budget and because of the sustainability issue. We wanted to keep this as sustainable as possible and not do these kind of techniques that don't improve, that make the footprint bigger. But this showcases that you can do this in a graphic way, and it doesn't have to, this kind of idea of a value can be seen just through color and form. So here we show how the new logo can be upgraded to have that kind of typographic technique that gives it that value. And then talking about how the typography that's in the rest of the packaging, when we get to that next, that can also be seen in a simple way. So we begin to kind of dissect each of the brand attributes that we talked about last time and begin to show how, also reminding them the approaches we want to take with the colored bar and looking at like kind of doing a study on color bars using this mood board technique or design inspiration and showing how color bars can be made to look maybe more, give it more of a premium feel to it, or it could be more practical and you can put the bar to work by putting elements in it, like shown in these two, or there could be like color systems maybe used for it if needed, but that the bar had appeared to be more dynamic and fun, like we're seeing down here below in the center. Then the idea of the R becoming an opportunity for branding this in a new way and showcasing inspiration boards that show how big letters or big letter forms are used in other packaging in really effective ways. And then the idea of the graphic hair swoosh and how swooshes are used in big brands like Coca-Cola or Mitchum or a lot of these other kind of personal care brands. And it's something that's not new and different, but something that, is almost, I don't want to say expected, but something that can be done that is effective and even maybe could be done in new ways. So kind of showing different kind of options for how a swoosh could work, or even looking at them as graphic lines and not necessarily swooshing, but being more linear. Even I think this Evian package is quite successful in showing how that can still be dynamic. And there's a lot of inspiration in this sort of ramp idea that we ended up taking from with this final solution. And then even just idea of hair texture is going to be a little more organic, and maybe there's some possibility there. Instead of this, the sort of simplified graphic, maybe it could be a little more organic. And now we get into the idea of design sketches and explorations. And this is a little bit very much connected, I should say, to what you're doing this coming week, which is like coming up with a concept that's written out with a theme. So each of these are going to have these kind of concept themes. There's only 4 of them. But the first one is the idea of a bridge. So that when we start talking about our design, we call it bridge. And when you give it a name like bridge or something that people can relate to and they see these images, and we talk about the idea of like the purpose of a bridge is to get from one point to another to a new destination, to get there safely. And the idea that bridges are these incredible engineering, high technology pieces and structures that are built. They're strong, they're beautiful, you trust them, usually most of the time. And that Rogaine can be seen as a bridge and also the fact that it takes a while to get across, like it's a journey that takes time, and Rogaine's a daily thing that you just stay on the bridge, you keep going, you'll get to the other side. And so with that kind of story narrative put in place for what the theme could be, we start to show what bridge looks like in sketch form. And this isn't typical how we always work in terms of being this kind of sketchy and rough, but it was what we decided to do here because we had such an active team and we didn't want to just jump in there with something that looks super finished. Because when you do that, when you do it like this and it's a sketch form, you leave the client and the team with the ability to, if you feel like they're participating, to not feel like the doors have closed and the idea is done, to kind of like open the oven while the muffins are still baking, and you can kind of see that what's going on and you can see the dough. And so I think it really helps to do this in here, and we also don't do this very often either. We kind of mix mood board with sketches, and you don't have to do this with what you guys are doing for your assignment, and you don't have to do sketches either. But I did say to everyone, you are welcome to do sketches. So if you want to take it to the stage, something like this, then go ahead, and don't think that we're like masterful sketches. I'm sure, I don't remember, but I bet we had these laid out and on a computer, and then we decided to sketch from the computer just to keep it at that level, but to make it look well done. All right, so that was one idea. And then step up was our second idea, and it's sort of inspired by this idea of the functionality of taking a step or using steps to get up to a destination. It's similar to the idea of the bridge, but slightly different, as you can kind of quantify each step. And they were drawn to that, that distinction was important to them. Like, yes, every day is a step, and you have to keep, to get to the top of the stairs, you got to climb every step, and you can't stop or skip any, or not very many at least. And it had this similar kinds of attributes about trust, and this idea of like delayed gratification, you know, like you got to take the time to get there. And that's all true with Rogaine. And again, you can see here that we're continuing to connect them to mastery, performance, and clarity. Make sure that these attributes of these concepts are woven within all of our ideas. So here's what Step Up looks like in sketch form, with like accompanying visual inspiration to help give them an idea of what we're thinking about. And then the third idea was Thrust, which took more and more of a kind of dynamic, almost technological turn, and trying to be more scientific maybe, and the idea of like something that's directional, like going towards a goal, and then moving quickly, and it's emotive, and it's working hard, it's moving forward. It has like a lot of nice attributes that that connect well with the idea of where Rogaine wants to go. And here we see Thrust as sketches and with accompanying mood boards. And then Wingman was the last and fourth one, which is this idea of kind of the that person, or seeing Rogaine as that person who supports you as the wingman. If you're a set of fighter pilots, you are the Tom Cruise, and then Rogaine is I think his name was Goose or something like that. He's the wingman, and he's there. He knows he knows the technology. He knows how to get it done. He supports you. It's all like, or like the caddy of a golfer. Like caddy knows what you need. It gives you the tools you need. You trust them. So that was a kind of a nice. That was a nice metaphor. And what I really regret though is that this was my one chance to use Chewbacca in a professional presentation. It didn't occur to me until as I was making the presentation, like, oh, I could have had Chewbacca and Han Solo in here. I blew it. So Wingman kind of looks like this. It's the idea of the big R, and how the big R sort of represents the wingman, the guy who's got your back, or the team member, the Rogaine being the science behind, you know, fighting hair loss, and we represent it like that. So that was the end of that meeting, and that of course caused a lot of great insightful conversation about which direction to go in, and I think it resulted in going in all the directions and just seeing what these would look like. So I just want to quickly show you before I end this how the next meeting, which is not what we're doing yet, but led towards more realized designs. So Bridge we started exploring Bridge in this kind of form, and utilizing this kind of rendering technology to help make it look good, and looking at the structures for how the packaging could work. Here's another Bridge direction. It's kind of inspired by a hair follicle growing. Step Up. This is direction one, and this is actually the direction that we ended up moving towards for the final solution. It looks pretty similar. There's differences, but this idea of this kind of ramp really made a good impression in terms of stepping up in a way that's going to lead you to the top, to the game. Looking at it a little more organically, and looking at silver instead of gold. A few more ideas. Looked at a lot of Step Up, and then looking at, oh, here's another one. Looking at black versus gold or silver. So kind of just having different, trying to bring in color variations as well as theme variations. And then Thrust, we kind of had like this sort of atmospheric look, this kind of almost misty look, and the movement with the graphic lines that, you know, used to be hair follicles. Now they're more like thrust lines. And then here are a few more. Here it is a little more dynamic and hard-edged, having just kind of this center point where everything kind of comes from, implying growth and good things happening. And here it is again as almost like this growing hair follicle. The bar becomes more active and shows more than just a straight bar. And then Wingman, we show variations on how that big R could be, it could be utilized. It doesn't have to be super obvious like the sketches. It could be kind of a subtle thing in the background, or it could even be cropped in a way where it's an R, but it serves more as that banner, that bar at the top. So that was the end of a certain meeting. This is just kind of recapping the designs. So that's a look at this case study for now, and hopefully that can kind of just give you kind of a bigger context for how you're developing your brand rebranding stage 2 presentation now. And again, as I said in class today, it's about creating these 2 to 3 concepts that you can talk about and write out in a way that's written that supports your strategy and supports the direction you want to take the brand in. And then to show a page of mood images that support that brand, the feel of it, the attributes that reflect that strategy, and then show design inspiration in a third page that shows techniques that reflect how you might approach your redesign. And then if you want to opt to show some sketches, that's possible too, but keep it on a preliminary side, keep it on a not complete looking side. But I recommend just don't bother doing that. And again, 2 to 3 ideas. If you have time for 3 is better, but I don't want to take up too much time if it's a time consuming just to do 2. So hope that was helpful, and I will see you on Monday.